So, welcome everybody. Welcome to this session with Sebastian Nehrdich. I'm really delighted that we are able to do this with him. I think it's a timely workshop for RYI, especially because we're an institute. Rangjung Yeshe Institute is a center for Buddhist studies in Kathmandu University. And we're really working with the tradition and with academic inquiry. So we're trying to bridge these two universes together, having a foot in both worlds. And it seems that AI is an interesting challenge for this journey. And so this is why we invited Sebastian to come to talk to us, because he's a key figure in the Buddhist world in making this tools perhaps more understandable to us and making us understand. I'm sorry for the sound of the plane here, but making us understand perhaps the advantage, some of the advantage and some of the disadvantage of AI on this path, perhaps even more in the translation world. So he initiated so many projects in this regard and is now leading the development of BuddhaNexus platform and leading the Dharmamitra project. So we want to welcome him. We are so pleased on behalf of RYI to have him. So welcome with me, Dr. Sebastian Nehrdich.
Yes, thank you so much, Diane. It's really wonderful to be here. And yeah, I'm happy to see quite a couple of known faces that have joined so far. And in a way, I think my paths have crossed the paths of people who studied at Rangjung Yeshe a lot of times when I was in Hamburg, of course, and later in Berkeley, and also like right now in multiple events. And I think there's just a naturally big intersection because the tools that we are developing are more or less directly aimed at people who do research and who are in language training of Tibetan language of Buddhist studies. And for that reason, I'm extremely happy that I can present our work here in this context. So thank you very much for the invitation. And yeah, I think today I would maybe, because we have quite some time, which is great, so I would start just with an introduction to the various tools that we have developed and that we are currently providing on the technological end. So just to yeah, give an introduction to what the Mitra system is offering to translators, to researchers within Buddhist studies, people who are in training and who are also already working professionally. And then we can also have a discussion later onwards on how these tools might influence education as well as translation practices and research, which I myself also think can go probably either ways right now. So the technology is powerful and it certainly makes a lot of things possible and available that have been more or less unthinkable just 3 or 4 years ago. But at the same time, this will change education and it will also change the way how scholarship is done in Buddhist studies. And I'm on the fence whether this will all be positive, but I think we can try to at least be aware and yeah, try to make the best out of these changes. They are going to happen. I think that's very difficult to avoid. And in that sense, maybe it's best to be just aware and open-minded and see what we can do with this. Yeah. So in that sense, yeah, I will first just give an introduction into the Dharmamitra project as such, an overview of the different tools we are offering, and then introduce our translation system, including the grammatical analyzer and the dictionary lookup, then the Mitra search and deep research system, which is, I think, playing a big role, especially for people who are working on canonical material that is available in multiple languages, where it really has a lot of unique capability to offer. Then I will introduce the Mitra browser extension, which for especially people who are translating or dealing a lot with sources in Tibetan and Sanskrit who have to quickly understand and read material can be extremely helpful because it integrates very seamlessly into the web browser and can then be used with BDRC and with other websites. Then I will introduce the DharmaNexus website, which is the continuation of BuddhaNexus. So that's a previous project I've been involved in at University of Hamburg, and DharmaNexus is kind of the evolution of this which currently serves as the main textual reference database and hub for the Mitra project. Then also the Mitra Sanskrit Tibetan dictionary, which I think can be especially useful for people who work with Tibetan material that is based on that is translated from Indic sources, where the need is frequently to look up the corresponding Sanskrit terminology for given Tibetan terms, and also the other way around. So people who are working on Sanskrit text that has been translated into Tibetan and where there's a frequent need to check possible Sanskrit equivalents um, Tibetan equivalents to Sanskrit terms. Then in the last part, I will talk about the community perception and the roadmap. So this is like how our user numbers, how many people interact with Dharmamitra at the moment, and also what we are planning in the future to do as the next steps. And then also depending on time, I have just put together a couple of thoughts on how Dharmamitra might, tools like Dharmamitra, like Gemini as well, Claude and ChatGPT, there's of course a whole array now of useful tools out there, and I think they all have their own strengths and weaknesses, and Dharmamitra offers something specific, I think, but I guess in humanities, a lot of people are now used to have multiple of these AI tools in parallel, maybe to use Claude for certain things because it does certain things very well, then to have Dharmamitra for other things and Gemini for other things. So in that sense, depending on how much time is left, we can discuss a bit towards the end on how these tools might influence scholarship. And then also because we have a second session coming later, we can also expand that discussion and talk on some more concrete examples when we get there. So starting with Mitra as a project. So just for those of you who are not yet familiar with us, so we are a research project that is co-hosted by the Tzada Foundation, Tohoku University, and the Berkeley AI Research Lab, which has originally started at UC Berkeley in April 2023. So this originally originated under the guidance of Professor Kurt Keutzer and has now been becoming a multi-institution endeavor. And we are mostly focusing on integrating advanced and data-driven methods into the daily workflow of translators and researchers of textual materials of the Buddhist tradition. So it's not really that we have a very clear mission of what we can ultimately provide. It's more like we are looking at technology and then seeing what can be done with the technology at the current given time. And in 2023, this was obviously machine translation, but it has now since then branched out into different tools like information retrieval, OCR, and so on. So in that way, Mitra is constantly evolving, and the kind of abilities we provide is strongly dependent on what technology can do at that given point of time. So at the current state, we are providing machine translation, then we have grammatical analysis, which is especially strong for Sanskrit, but it's also available for Tibetan and for Chinese. Then we have our search system, which has multiple advanced features, and we have an OCR system. And all of these are targeting Tibetan, Sanskrit, Pāli, and the Buddhist domain of Chinese. And then, DharmaNexus features as the main underlying database to provide all the textual references. So in that sense, we have the OCR system, which allows users to scan large documents. So this is different from other available online tools, I think, because here you can really upload multiple megabytes and files with hundreds of pages, and then convert these automatically into machine readable text, like documents that you can actually search in. There can be in Wiley or Unicode for Tibetan and IST or Devanagari for Sanskrit material. Then we have machine translation, currently focusing on Sanskrit, Tibetan, Buddhist, Chinese, and Pali, with the main modern language being English. So this is our current constraint, even though we do provide Japanese and French and Italian and a number of other modern languages, but I don't think the quality is as high as for English. So my recommendation would always be to set the switch to English in order to get the highest possible quality. Then we have grammatical explanation, which especially is important for Sanskrit because we have a very precise tool for word segmentation, morphosyntactic tagging, and lexical and syntactical analysis for each sentence. We also provide this for Tibetan, even though the situation for Tibetan is a bit more complex because word segmentation is not as clearly defined, the boundaries of where words start and end, as well as compound words in that sense is much less clearly defined, and for that reason the system is also not as reliable, but still we provide that ability. And then we have meta search and deep research, which is really important capability to finding for a given translation, for example, the possible references across all four languages that are stored in the database. And also gives the ability to do targeted queries with the meta search system that has a set of filters enabled that make it possible to do very precise queries. And then we have DharmaNexus, which is a complex text database that has intertextual references and multilingual parallels stored. So in a way, DharmaNexus is the crucial data storage where all of these connections that Meta is able to find and to surface to the users are actually stored. Then we have a very helpful, I think, browser extension. So this brings machine translation and grammatical explanation into standard web browsers, and we are currently supporting Chrome and Firefox for this. And lastly, the Meta dictionary, which I think has about 4 million entries. I will show a bit later on a slide what this can actually do. For those of you who have never tried Dharmamitra, it's quite simple. We have a website at dharmamitra.org, and you can also use this QR code in case that is more comfortable. And it's free to use, so you don't have to pay anything. And it's also we are not planning to introduce anything like paid accounts. That's not on our roadmap. We might actually add user accounts at some point, but that is more to provide some capabilities that we currently can't do, like, for example, individual histories for each users, because you might want to continue a certain translation project, for example. So it can be very helpful to have those history functionality that Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT by now have. So we are planning to add that in the coming months, but we will not charge people to use the system. That is not planned. So to look a bit more closely at the meta translation and the grammatical analyzer part. So as I said before, we are mostly focusing on Sanskrit, Tibetan, Chinese, and Pali into English and other target languages. I think it's technically possible to enter Prakrit, for example, or maybe even Newari, but the quality of the translation will not be very great because we have done targeted data collection for all of these languages. So we have digitized existing translations. We have aligned them with the Tibetan and Sanskrit originals. So that's part of the underlying database of the meta system to increase the quality. But we have not done this effort for Prakrit or for other languages here. So in that case, I think it's really best to focus on these four. We have grammatical explanations for Sanskrit, Tibetan, and Chinese. which are also including dictionary links into the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism by Chuck Miller, and in the case of Chinese. And then we have Christian Steinert's great accumulated Tibetan dictionary, which is a wonderful interface to a number of great dictionaries. So this is what we provide for the users to have a quick access to the lexical references. It is currently state of the art, which is a bit computer science language to say that we might be the most precise tool when it comes to translating Sanskrit, Tibetan, and Chinese to English, even though that is also something that can change on a frequent basis. And I would always suggest to also try Gemini and Claude and other tools in parallel with Mitra, because while we are generally, I think, doing a good job, you might see that Claude can be a bit more precise in rendering specific vocabulary. So this is always a bit of a hit and miss. So I would suggest not to rely solely on Mitra, even though I think statistically speaking, we are usually providing a very reliable experience. So in that sense, yeah, our evaluation has shown that Mitra is most of the time a bit better. This is also what our users tell us, but that doesn't mean it's always better. So please, it's always good to have multiple opinions. And so we believe that this tool addresses a real need. So scholars in textually oriented Buddhist studies often have to work efficiently on material in multiple difficult to learn languages. So this is not so much about replacing the whole process of translation, where the idea would be to have this tool and then we don't have to translate at all anymore. And when it comes to publishing translations of works, we will just rely on these tools. This is not really what we had in mind when we created this. It's much more about making it easier to handle literature. In the case of, for example, I myself don't really have spent that much time in training Tibetan language than other people have. So for me, if I look at a patcha, it really takes time to understand what's going on, and it can really take a long time. So if I just use a tool like Dharmamitra, I can quickly understand the content, and then I know if this is relevant to my work or not. And I think that's one of the main use cases that we had in mind when we built this. It's not really about making the actual work of translation unnecessary, but it's about, yeah, basically like a more advanced dictionary feature that can give you a rough rendering, and then you can decide if you want to actually work on this and retranslate it or change things. So in that sense, it's a bit like a faster way to get to a rough understanding of the material and not to replace the actual process of translation. And I think this is something that really comes up a lot in Buddhist studies, because we have to deal often with material in multiple languages. So it's not just Tibetan or Sanskrit, but we might also have to take into account references in Chinese and Pāli, and then being competent and efficient across all of these languages becomes incredibly difficult. And these tools can just give an immense easier access to all of this material. And it might even make it possible to do certain research with using primary sources in a language where one doesn't have a lot of training, like at least finding references and parallel passages that are more or less obvious. I think with these tools suddenly becomes possible. Just to give one demonstration of how this looks in practice. So you can just click on, you can paste a passage, and then you will see how our system translates, and then has not just the English rendering, but then also the grammatical explanations, including the breakdown, so the breakdown of the sandhi, the individual components of the words, and then also the case tagging in the case of Sanskrit, and some kind of explanation of the meaning. And this is all done based on the digital Sanskrit corpus created by Dr. Oliver Helwig. So this is another very important part of the Mitra project, is the corpus linguistic work of Dr. Helwig. And we are very fortunate that he has always been very liberal with his data and was very supportive in integrating that into this system. Yeah. Then when it comes to the dictionary integration, so here you can see that we also provide these a grammatical breakdown and the dictionary links for Tibetan and for Chinese, even though there needs to be a word of caution with this, because while for Sanskrit we have the corpus linguistic annotations of the DCS, which gives us a very large and stable databases for creating this feature, we don't have the same strongly annotated data sets for Tibetan and for Chinese. And this is also why you will see the behavior of these grammatical breakdown and the dictionary links be a bit less reliable, in the sense that sometimes the word boundaries can be something you might disagree with, and also the links into the dictionaries might sometimes not completely match up with what our system is deciding to do. So in that sense, the output of the grammatical analyzer for Tibetan and for Chinese is less reliable, but we still believe that this can be useful in education on trying to understand the structure and meaning of a sentence, but it has to be used with a bit of care, I think. But yeah, having the links into the dictionaries for the individual terms, I think this can be very helpful. Then moving on to the meta search and deep research systems. So what kind of problem are we actually trying to solve here? So if we think about, in addition to translation, which is of course one major task in research in Buddhist studies, the next problem that we have is, if we have a passage and we might be able to translate it, but we also have to think about the contextuality of that passage. So we might have an idea like the suffering of ordinary beings that is being compared to a hair that is placed on the palm of the hand. In that case, so far, if we have to solve this with the tools available, this is time consuming. So if we start with the Sanskrit verse, we first have to run a search on Sanskrit data, which since there are fragmented databases all around the place, and there are great projects like Gretel, like the Digital Sanskrit Buddhist Canon by the University of the West, this still requires significant effort on our end. Like we have to download all of this data, store it into one place, and then use local search tools like Grab and others to run the actual search. And then if we want to find the same passage in Tibetan, we have to use special resources for Tibetan, like going to BDRC, for example, and then we have to reason about possible renderings of this Sanskrit verse into Tibetan, what kind of keywords could be appropriate, and then we can type them in, and then hopefully we will find something that matches our query. And if we want to also check the Chinese sources and Pāli, this again requires to go to different databases like the Sebeta or SAT databases for Chinese, and for Pāli, maybe Sutta Central could be a good resource. Or the Vipassana Research Institute, I think they also used to have a website. So yeah, this becomes time consuming. And of course, every time we have to move to another language, it's more challenging to come up with the right search terminology. Yeah, and if it's difficult to even find anything, then basically we have to start again and think about different terminology to look for. So this is all a very frustrating and time-consuming experience. And I think everybody who has done an MA or a PhD in a Buddhist studies, textual studies related topic will have been at this point at some point. So this can take a few hours if the situation is rather clear, but on average, this can take much, much longer. And I certainly remember times in Hamburg where it took me weeks and weeks to find all the possible references to even one verse, so that can really happen. So in that sense, Meta Search is addressing this, so you can set the target here to search, and then you paste a phrase and you click on search, and this phrase can be in English, for example. So this example here uses English, but it could also be Sanskrit, Tibetan, or anything else. And then you will see how the results are located in different languages across our data set. So in this case, we are zooming in on one example in Tibetan, and it then gives the reference, it explains, it gives a translation of the reference, it explains the context and the how it relates to the query, and then it's also able to actually show the multilingual parallels from the DharmaNexus database. So in this case, we have all of this then assembled in one place. So Mitra Search does combine multiple things in one tool. So it's in that sense technologically a bit complex. So for Sanskrit, we are using advanced linguistic preprocessing that we have already deployed in BuddhaNexus. So this includes Sandhi compounding, Sandhi processing, compounding, and morphology. So you can imagine for Sanskrit, since it's very productive with the morphology and the Sandhi merging of words makes things really complex. So there's a lot of linguistic processing needed in order to create a reliable search system. So that is something we have integrated. And then we enable the semantic search within the same language. So it's possible to find passages that express a similar meaning in different wording, which, yeah, I think you can imagine if some particles are used differently in Tibetan or some auxiliary words are used or not used, all of these kind of things influence whether we are able to find a result or not. And in that sense, the Mitra search system is able to find passages even if the wording is different. And then I think as a strong capability, we have multilingual semantic search. So it's possible to, for example, find Tibetan passages based on Sanskrit sentences or the other way around. That also works. And then we have limited capabilities to do searches for terms, concepts, ideas, and questions. So it's possible to type in English concept, like, for example, the threefold suffering, and then you will get um, uh, passages that discuss this, or the Tri Svabhava, the three different natures, all of these kind of things. You can use our system also to do this like topic-oriented queries, even though the reliability is a bit more questionable. I think it's usually able to come up with relevant references, but yeah, I think it's a bit less clear cut than the previous use cases. And then basically building on top of the Mitra search system, we have the deep research system. So this is something we have, it was more or less an accident, but I can give a demonstration of it first. So in order to use deep research, you have to set the target language to English research, and then you can paste a sequence and then click on the translation button. And in this case, we have the Sanskrit Trimshika Kardikas as the search query, and then the system is providing a translation, which is then followed by a contextual explanation of the related references from the DharmaNexus database, and then it provides the original Sanskrit passages as well as the Sanskrit commentary, in this case, the Trimshika Bhashya, and the same for Tibetan. So it starts with the Karikas and then moves on to the Trimshika Tika and the Bhashya. And it also recovers references into the Changwei Shalun, which is a Chinese rendering of these verses, together with the commentary. So it's in a way, it's able to cover all three relevant languages and the including references here in one go. And basically, this is a combination of the Mitra search system and the translation system. So it was discovered by accident because we figured out that if we include the Mitra search results in the translation process, we can actually create a translation system that does a lot more than just translate, and in a way then covers a lot of basic work that has to be done when we are translating material that is available in multiple language, because these references can be incredibly helpful and also contribute to a higher translation quality. So yeah, on a technical level, the Mitra Deep Research System is combining the strengths of Mitra Search and the Mitra Machine Translation System into one unified experience. So instead of having to search in one tab and then to translate in another tab, this basically brings both of these functionalities in the same place. It provides the machine translation, including contextual explanations, and covers all four languages. So you can use Pāli, Tibetan, Chinese, and Sanskrit. one very important thing that we provide is the links into DharmaNexus. So the user can actually read the source text and context and verify the validity of the generated output and also explore the intertextual reference. And this is extremely important, and I can only stress this, that our deep research system is still a generative AI system. So it has the same occasional problems that you might already be familiar with when using Claude or other tools, that it will sometimes make up things that are not evidenced by actual data. And it's like technically difficult to contain. We are trying to be more reliable than other tools, and I think on average this is working out. So the answers that deep research is giving usually are backed up by references, and those references you can click on and you can actually read the source text yourself in order to verify. And we can only stress that this is an extremely important step that every user of the system should make use of as much as possible, because it's not technically not entirely possible to totally prevent Mitra deep research from hallucinating. And we occasionally get feedback. I think so far we started in August, and so it's been, I think, 7 or 8 months since we launched it, and we have gotten, I think, 3 emails from people who have found deep research to show some references which are not existing. And of course, these are serious cases, and we are always trying to improve the system to provide less hallucinations and less irrelevant context, but it's very difficult to completely eliminate that. So in that sense, I think please try to approach the system with some care and some caution. And before you cite anything in your work, please look up DharmaNexus, because we have the actual e-text stored in DharmaNexus, and that is, I think, even not enough, because an e-text still can contain typos and so on, and we are actually using OCR software for our e-text, so there are also problems in the actual data that can happen. So of course there's no way to avoid going back to the actual block prints, to the PDFs of the Sanskrit edition. So this is what we should actually all do when using this system. And we are trying to improve the linking into other databases to make this easier. So for example, with RKTS, we are currently trying to make sure that we provide the links on folio level. So if you are looking at a Tibetan passage, then you can click on a link and you will be led directly to the block prints at RKTS. So that's one thing we are working on. And the same for Sanskrit. We are trying to integrate the PDFs of the actual critical editions, so you can really look up the PDF pages. And for the dictionaries, we have already done this. So in the grammatical analyzer, we have added the links to the PDF pages of Monye-Williams and Bödling and the Sanskrit, Edgerton's Sanskrit dictionary, the Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. So this is, I think, one of the future directions we are taking to try to make the system more reliable, because we probably cannot fix the technology since it is what it is, but we can certainly make it easier for the users to access the actual sources to verify the data and the quality by yourself. When it comes to the question on how the system works, this is, of course, complicated technology, and I think in the context here, it might go a bit far in going too much in detail into the technology, so I will keep it brief, but I still want to give some idea on how the technology is actually operating under the hood when you are working with Mitra Search or with the deep research system. So when we have an input query, this could be Sanskrit, Tibetan, or others, then we have the first step where we turn this input query into a so-called neural embedding. So we use a deep neural network that will take the language and turn that into numbers, into a so-called vector, which is a numerical representation. So the neural network is trained on recognizing patterns in text across languages. So this network will then create a so-called vector, and then we can use this vector to query the different databases we have. And DharmaNexus has all of these indices, both for Pāli, for Tibetan, for Sanskrit, for Chinese, and then including selected secondary literature as well. So we can query each of these index and retrieve the relevant results from each of these indices. And then we have the last step, which is we can aggregate all of this information and then use an LLM to create either a translation in the case of the Mitra translation system, or some synthesis in the case of the deep research system, where we then also provide references and links and so on. So in that sense, the actual AI in the sense we are using the term nowadays really is only appearing at the very last step. So we have a lot of database pre-processing and some neural networks in form of the neural embedding engine. And the AI is really doing a rather small part in the whole Mitra system. And we are using Gemini because we had a collaboration with Google when I was still in Berkeley that started, I think, in 2024, at the end of 2024, and they provided us Gemini credits for research purposes. And we were very grateful that we received those credits and then switched our system to use Gemini. So this is what we are still using right now. And so far it has been, I think, a good choice for the last step of summarization and translation in combination with our database. Yeah, then moving on to the browser extensions. So the main idea here is to provide the users with a convenient way of using Dharmamitra in existing workflows. So instead of trying to provide everything on the Mitra platform, which would be one way to do it, we are more trying to just be a helpful tool that people can use in their existing translation workflow. So if you already use BDRC, for example, then we don't have a big intention to replace the existing database, but to see how we can integrate our tools into the existing workflow of the users. And the Mitra browser extensions are a big part of this. And especially in collaboration with the Tara Foundation, we put a lot of emphasis on making these tools accessible so you can use the translator when working on PDF files, for example. You can open them in your web browser and you can then mark text and translate it automatically and so on. So in order to install the Google Chrome extension, on the one hand, you can use this QR code, but then you can also search on Google for the Dharmamitra Chrome extension. It's always a bit opaque on how to find this. I think, yeah, the Google search might be the most reliable way. We also have a link in our wiki where we have all the information on Dharmamitra, so that's also a place to find it. Yeah, but I think the easiest way is to just Google. And if you want to have the Firefox extension, then maybe just search for Dharmamitra Firefox extension. And once you have installed the Chrome extension, there are basically two ways on how to use it. So the one way is you just mark a piece of text and then do a right click with your mouse and choose Analyze with Dharmamitra, and this will then open the sidebar with the translation. Or you can just click on the Dharmamitra icon in the extension bar. So after installing the extension, there's a small Dharmamitra Dharma wheel appearing. And if you mark some piece of text and you click on that wheel, then the translation process will automatically start. So these are the two ways on how to trigger this. It basically provides the same functionality as dharmamitra.org for translation. So it's really optimized to do translation. The Mitra Chrome extension doesn't do OCR or the Mitra search function at the moment. So that's a bit limited in that regard. But yeah, we have a convenient in-web browser experience. Yeah, and I can just recommend to install that. I'm using it myself quite a lot. It actually works well for non-classical languages as well. So if you have to deal with modern Chinese or Japanese, you can also use the Chrome extension. I think it should do rather well on these as well. Then yeah, moving on to the DharmaNexus system. So this is kind of the long end of Dharmamitra. So it is an intertextuality exploration database that is based on the foundational work that we have done with BuddhaNexus. But over the years, we have improved the algorithm. So the text matching of the system has been gotten more reliable over the years. Then we have also improved the user interface, which now looks a bit more modern compared to BuddhaNexus. We have integrated multilingual parallels, so this is a very big, important step up that I will also talk a bit more about later. So the ability to go from Sanskrit to Chinese or from Chinese to Tibetan has been added. And also very crucially is that DharmaNexus is integrated into the other Mitra tools. So whenever you get a reply from the deep research system or from the Mitra search system, this is actually operating on top of data that we have collected for the DharmaNexus system. We do provide the monolingual intertextual links for Sanskrit, Tibetan, Pali, and Chinese. So this has been one of the strong capabilities of BuddhaNexus, that it automatically calculates all of the possible occurrences of specific verses and text passages across the entirety of the Tibetan Kangyo and Tengyo, for example, or the Sanskrit data from Gretil and from the digital Sanskrit Buddhist canon, and we are preserving this functionality at DharmaNexus. So you can also do that kind of research with DharmaNexus. And then we have the multilingual sentence level parallel data for Sanskrit and Tibetan, Sanskrit and Chinese and Tibetan. And this is all in all over 2 million parallel sentences. So BuddhaNexus did include the Sanskrit to Tibetan links, and I think at that time we had about 350,000 sentences, but you can see how over the recent years, as the technology improves and we can provide better algorithms, also the amount of data that we are covering here is increasing. But of course, these intertextual links are not manually controlled. So as you can imagine, nobody can verify each of these 2 million sentences if they're actually aligned correctly or not. And you will obviously find mistakes where our system has maybe only aligned half a sentence with a matching sentence in another language, or maybe it has skipped and overlooked a couple of sentences. That can also happen because this is all in all an automatic solution. And in that sense, it is a bit different from the database at the University of Oslo, for example, where people have really manually input the text on a sentence basis. So here we are really doing this automatically. And in that sense, also, please exercise some caution when working with this. So most of the time, I think it's a very useful resource, but it is not the final authority on these multilingual parallels. There's still some human thought that has to go into the process. Yeah, and DharmaNexus is providing the reference links for deep research and for Mitra search, which is very, very important in our eyes. Yeah, the interface is for those of you who are familiar with BuddhaNexus, nothing new, to put it that way. So we have the text view, and then we use a color-coded scheme that the users can click on in order to go to the references in different languages. So after clicking on a piece of text here on the left-hand side, the middle column will open and will then display the various intertextual parallels, either in the same language or in different languages. And then after clicking on one of these matches in the middle, you will then see on the right-hand side the reference text opening. So this enables to browse text in parallel. So if you are looking at a Sanskrit text and want to read the Chinese translation in parallel, this is one way to do it. And then it also has the monolingual links that enable the exploration of all the textual references. So yeah, this is basically very similar to how BuddhaNexus operated. Then we also provide the so-called table view, so you can change the view mode to a table overview, and this then enables to just look at the textual references in a tabular format and to apply some filters, like limiting the results to only matches between two specific texts, for example, that is possible, or only within a specific section of the corpus, which all of these choices are possible here. And then lastly, we do have the statistical overviews as well. So this can give some idea on how many citations or parallels, to be more precise, a specific text has with other texts and other categories. So for example, in this case, the Madhyanta Vibhagatika is obviously a Yogacara text. And you can see how 67% of the textual references in the Madhyanta Vibhaga Tika are with other Yogacara texts. So that is obviously very productive. But then it also has references to the Prajnaparamita literature, to other Mahayana sutras, even to Madhyamika works. So all of these intertextual relations, you can use the tool here as a convenient way to get an overview. Yeah, so that is all for DharmaNexus. Then moving on to the Mitra Sanskrit Tibetan Dictionary, which I think is also a very, very, very interesting resource. So again, in order to access this, you can probably just Google for Mitra Sanskrit Tibetan Dictionary. That should get you there, or you can use the QR code. But then I think we also have the link to the dictionary in our wiki. So if you go to the documentation on the Dharmamitra website, you will get the wiki where all the tools are listed, and the Sanskrit Tibetan Dictionary is also among those. It has over 4 million entries in size, so this is considerably larger than the Negi dictionary. And in that sense, it is based on the Sanskrit Tibetan parallel data of the Mitra parallel data set. So previously, when I showed in DharmaNexus those parallel sentences that we have, this is basically data that we used as the basis for the dictionary here. So we have all of these Sanskrit Tibetan sentence pairs. And then we basically used Gemini to extract the head words with their corresponding cross-lingual parallels. So for each of the Sanskrit terminologies, we extracted the matching Tibetan, and then we used some constraints on this to filter out the wrong alignments so that we only have the correct alignments remaining. And this creates a dictionary that has over 4 million entries and is over 10 gigabytes in size. So if you want to download this to your hard drive, you need to be prepared to use about 10 gigabytes of your hard drive for this. It has more or less exhaustive evidence for each entry. So this is different than Negi. So we are trying to provide, for example, the translation of Dharma as Chö. We are trying to provide almost every possible occurrence of this translation across the data that we have. So this can, of course, lead to over 1,000 of references for a given term, and you will see this. If you open up the term Chö in our dictionary, you will probably find more than 5,000 or 6,000 references, and these are sorted by the categories. So we have the text organized by Kangyo and Tengyo, and then also into the individual subsections of each of the collections. So you can, for example, limit your search, or you can only open the references within Madhyamika literature, for example, or Tantric literature. All of these choices are possible. And you might notice this, that the extraction of the boundaries of the entries is not always 100% on spot. So when we constructed this dictionary, we decided to keep the morphology for the entries. So instead of turning each occurrence of Dharmasya into Dharma, we actually kept Dharmasya, because this also can be interesting when you work with the dictionary. If you want to know how, for example, the genitive of the word Dharmasya is rendered into Tibetan, we preserve this because we believe that it can be useful for our users. But then you will obviously see that this extraction is not always working perfectly. So the Tibetan translator might have used some particles to render this, or maybe not. And this is where our system becomes a bit unreliable. So you have to actually look at the whole sentence to understand whether the extraction was complete or not. So that's a bit of a word of caution to be aware of when working with this dictionary. We are preparing an online version, so I think yeah, we have been working on this since January, and I really hope that we can do it before the summer. So now we have a bit of time to do this. So hopefully in June or July we will have this online. Yeah, and in practice, this is how it looks like. So you can search for a Sanskrit term or also for Tibetan terms. It works both directions. And you can include the morphology, so you can also remove it, so you don't have to include it. But if you include it, you will still find entries. And then we are providing the head word together with the Tibetan translation. and then the references across the different sections of the literature. So here in this case, for this term, I have opened the Yogacara literature section, and then you can see the reference of this sentence in, yeah, providing the, I think Yogacara Bhumi, this must be the Bodhisattva Bhumi perhaps. And then, yeah, the Tibetan is provided both in Unicode and Wiley, and we also provide links to Dharmamitra. So yeah, I think this should be a useful resource. So all in all, if we look at all of these tools together, we have some kind of a Mitra workflow. At least that's the way how we think about the platform, how it might be used in a productive way. So we start with the Mitra translation system, which is mostly there to create draft renderings and quick overview of the content in a modern language that the researcher is familiar with. And in this sense, we are not aiming at making translation less entertaining or replacing translators. In that sense, I think that's very far from the reality. And I think if we look at the quality of Dharmamitra nowadays, we can probably all agree that almost any output that the system is creating still requires a lot of human intervention before it can be put into a printed translation or a published work. So, and that's, we are, I think, on the same page in that regard, that Mitra is not designed to replace translators. Then we have the deep research system, which in our ideas there to provide an overview of intertextuality and of possible links into DharmaNexus. It also needs to be said that deep research tends to simplify and to also sometimes omit data that might be relevant because it provides these convenient text summaries. And this is also something to be aware of. So deep research is not here to give the definitive answer, but it's a starting point to explore the intertextuality, and it provides the links into DharmaNexus. But it's really important to actually look at the data and to use DharmaNexus as a tool to understand the intertextuality better than whatever deep research might provide. Then we have DharmaNexus, which works as the main place to actually look at the source context and then maybe use the deeper textual links that are recorded in the database. And lastly, we have Mitra Search, which is a more precise tool to do targeted exploration of passages and ideas and concepts. And it also has the ability to use filters to narrow down the results. So you can limit your filters to only a specific section of your data. And in that way, it becomes a more powerful and more focused and precise tool as compared to the deep research system, which kind of goes very broad and then provides summaries across all of the literature. Yeah, and in that way, I think we have this workflow that you can apply again and again on each new passage that you might encounter in your work. Now moving on to the community perception. So what did we learn over the last, I think, roughly 2 years? So we have started in 2024. And right now we have a group of roughly 1,000 core translation users that send more than one query a day. So every day, these are the numbers of people who do repeated queries to the system daily. So while we have no way to figure out who these people are, we can at least see how many addresses worldwide are accessing our system. And this makes it possible to say that we have about 1,000 people who use it actively on a daily basis. And this results into between 10 and 15,000 daily translation requests. So these numbers go a bit up and down depending on the season. Weekends are usually a bit weaker than weekdays, but on average we have around 10 to 15,000 requests. And the deep research and Mitra search system are also used quite substantially. So we have about 1,000 daily requests for these two systems combined. So this is people who use Mitra not just for translation, even though that's certainly the biggest slice of our user base, but who actually use it for intertextual research. And then we do get a lot of positive feedback from all over Buddhist Studies community. So while we do get emails about hallucinations in our system, we also get emails and maybe actually a bit more than Then we get critical emails about people who are very happy that they could find a certain parallel to a verse that they have been working on for some time and how much easier it made the work. And we are also hearing this sometimes in presentations of other professors, of other experienced researchers, that they are using Mitra to solve some intertextual problems or to find some references. So it seems to be really useful for this. And if we look at the international distribution, so this is just an overview of where the different queries for the system come from. So we have clearly users at the American West Coast, which is where we started our work, so at UC Berkeley. And then in the beginning, I think our first users basically came from Stanford, from Berkeley, from those kind of networks over there. And very quickly we got also users from within India, from within Nepal, East Asia, Taiwan, and Japan, and then of course the hotspots in Europe as well. And usually our users are coming from places where strong Buddhist studies programs or translation projects are located. So Kathmandu is obviously a hub that has a lot of Dharmamitra users, but then also Vienna, for example, and Boston, Berkeley, Tokyo, Taipei, and so on. So these are usually the places where most of our users are coming from. So what are we currently doing to improve the system, and what is our roadmap in the future? So in February 2026, we have added a lot of Tibetan data. So this is mainly done in collaboration with the Tada Foundation around the Rinchen Terze and then the Nyingma Kama and a couple of other texts from the Dharma Cloud and further material. And we also have a strategic data partnership with BDRC. So together with BDRC, we are working on a large project to do an OCR with improved quality of all the Tibetan material that is stored in BDRC. And we really hope that we can make this available on our search system in the future. It's of course technologically challenging because this is really a lot of data, and how we can actually manage to provide all of this in our in our web interface, that remains a question of the future, but we certainly work on this currently. Then when it comes to Sanskrit, we are continuously adding new e-texts on a quarterly basis, and we are working together with other institutions and projects on making this happen, even though it's certainly a challenging undertaking because we don't have the large already established canon of Buddhist Sanskrit literature, so it's much more about fragmented efforts on digitizing critical editions and making them available. But we really hope that we can improve to have a better data coverage. And then obviously our Sanskrit data currently has some known problems, like we are lacking the metadata to give references to the critical editions and the actual origin. And this is something we are working on quite focusedly here at the moment, and we hope in the next a couple of weeks to have an update that will provide the relevant metadata for each text that you can look up where the edition is taken from and so on. So this is under preparation right now, and it will be added soon. Then we have also expanded our data for non-Buddhist pre-modern text together with the Kanseki Kanripo repository for Chinese data by Christian Wittern at Kyoto University. So we have added the main classics of Chinese literature, the works written by masters, and the Taoist canon as well. So this was also something that our users have requested again and again in the past. It would be so nice to use DharmaNexus and Mitra deep research to compare material across the classical Chinese, the Buddhist Chinese, and the Taoist canon. And we have finally added this, so you can now also use Mitra to explore this kind of literature. Then we are working on Japanese material, especially Buddhist Japanese material. There are, of course, huge amounts of relevant translations into Japanese that are a wonderful source for Dharmamitra. And currently, we have a pilot project here on digitizing the Kokuyaku Isaikyo Japanese translation of the Taisho Tripitaka. And that is our first step into integrating Japanese material as well. So, yeah, this will certainly expand in the future. And on the research end, we are working on the development of OCR models for both Sanskrit and Tibetan. And we have some encouraging results on this. And hopefully in 2026, we can make these models available on our website. So currently, Mitra is using the Gemini system for OCR, and we will replace this with our custom model in the near future. Then we also work on the Mitra Explore system. So I was hoping a bit that we might have this update already in place for this workshop, but as these things always take a bit longer than we anticipated, it might take a couple more days. But it could actually happen in the next week or two that we will replace our existing interface with the new interface. So this has some significant redesign. And one part is that we are basically replacing the Mitra search system with the Mitra Explore system, which enables the users to paste in passages. And in this example, the output is in Japanese, but you can also, of course, use English and other languages. And it is kind of a combination of Mitra search and deep research. So instead of having these two separate tools, we are trying to provide to the users a summary and an overview of the results, but then also to provide the database results as Meta Search does at the moment. So it's an attempt to integrate all of this into a more comprehensive tool, and then also to provide the users with the ability to render these results into their own preferred language. So currently, deep research is only available in English, and that's a pity. So this is one step for us to enable the system to also cover other languages, so that you can use Explore in Japanese, in modern Chinese, in other languages as well. Then another small footnote at this point is our segment-aligned corpus web interface. So this is a tiny thing that is addressing the need of specific users. So we got some emails over the years that it would be nice to have only the parallel data separate from DharmaNexus and from Mitra Deep Research. So really just to look up, for example, the Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya and the Tibetan translation of that. And for that reason, we have created this small HTML parallel corpus. So if you just want to read a Sanskrit text along with its translation into a different language, you can absolutely do that in this small web interface. So it's available at this URL or also at this QR code. So yeah, this is a recent addition. I think we just added it last week, but it might be helpful. So just a small thing, but for some people, I hope it's helpful. Yeah, I think this is for the technological part of my presentation. I wonder if we maybe should make a break for questions and things at this point, and then we can maybe move on to the yeah, how this might affect translators and so on in a later part. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. It's humbling to see all this work that went into this to help research and so on. It's really humbling. So thank you so much for continuous attention to these needs of research, actually. And so I would like to open the questions to our group here. If there are any questions or comments, please lift your electronic hand so we can kind of like have a little bit of an order. So I know that all these tools are very helpful for our research at RYI, definitely. I was really intrigued because my own research was on the Chininamche, the Dharmamitra Vibhaga, and I had the Japanese work that had been written in Japanese, so I had to make friends with Japanese to get some kind of translation at the time. This is a few years back. So I was really happy to see that you're actually going to integrate, because some of the work done in Japan is sometimes left aside because of language. So this is changing the whole research universe, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And especially maybe within Buddhist studies, the disconnect connect between Japanese scholarship and Western scholarship in the larger sense done in Europe, in North America, done at the Yangon Geshe Institute. Of course, this is a bit of a pity, and it has probably really hindered progress for many years because, yeah, for either side, I think learning the other main research language is a big task. Yeah, to study enough Japanese to interact with secondary resources is challenging, and the other way around as well, I think, for Japanese scholars to learn enough English to work fluently with the resources and to publish in English is also asking a lot. So I really hope that we can work on bridging these two worlds. And of course, it's not always easy, like especially copyright and reservations on that regard. I think this is a question on how we can navigate this in the future. And I'm sure there must be ways to work this out, maybe on institutional level to join forces. And yeah, I would be extremely happy if we can provide Japanese secondary literature on our website. Yeah, so that's certainly one direction we are working on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great because also
Mm,
you're really well situated for
mm,
that, working
mm,
at your university, right?
mm. Yes. Yeah, and I'm also very happy my university actually has a strong interest in finding ways to make Japanese scholarship more accessible worldwide. And I think we are finally in a good place, technologically speaking, to really make progress on that. Yeah.
Wonderful. There is a
Mm,
question that is
mm,
written down. So,
mm,
are many are any parts of this technology available or planned to be available as open source or in the form of reusable libraries?
mm,
Example, Sanskrit sandification, the desandification Python module.
mm. Yes, so this is actually all available open source at the moment. So we have our Sanskrit grammatical module that is on Hugging Face. So I can type that in the chat for those of you who are interested in playing around with these tools yourself. You can find this on Hugging Face. We actually have a paper that describes the grammatical analysis for Sanskrit. So this is called BAIR 5 Sanskrit. So I think if you Google for that, one of the first hits will be this model. And we also provide the links to the GitHub repository with the open source scripts in that place. And we also have open source um, available of our older machine translation model. So until beginning of 2025, we actually used our own machine translation model, which we trained at UC Berkeley and which was also used at Mönlam AI for a while. So in the very beginning, we had Mönlam AI as our big collaboration partner on machine translation, and we used to train models especially for that purpose. But at some point, it became more efficient to combine Gemini with our data instead of training ourselves. So we have those older models; they are available on Hugging Face and on GitHub. But yeah, since about beginning of 2025, we are not training machine translation anymore. But we also have our semantic search model available. Um, that you can download and use for your own project. So the semantic similarity model is also open source. And I think all the parallel data that we are using on our website is also open source. So the entire Mitra parallel corpus is available for research. So you can do with it whatever you would like to do. So this is all free. And I think some of our data sets might not be in Creative Commons licensing, at least when it comes to data we have on DharmaNexus. So we cannot provide everything freely. There are some restrictions, but most of it is available in our GitHub organization. So if you go to Dharmamitra on GitHub, you will find all of these things that are available. So please check it out. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm,
So Anna is just graduated from IMS. She has a
mm,
question. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. I have a question regarding OCR.
mm,
Currently, Dharmamitra offers an OCR
mm,
function, and at first glance, it seems to work well. However, on closer inspection, it always alters individual words and even entire phrases which then requires quite a substantial editing afterwards. For this reason, I still prefer using old image to text website as it tends to produce fewer errors. I'm curious about the current state of OCR development, whether there have been improvements or if there are more reliable methods of OCR that I may not be aware of.
Mm. Yes, yes, this is we also notice these problems, and I think there's a bit of this is a bit of change and generation of technology. So I think OCR has been so far done with these more traditional character-based models, so they are less likely to change words or whole phrases. But I think since about 1 or 2 years, the models are now changing, or the large providers are now changing to do more with vision language models, which are basically LLMs or language models like ChatGPT trained on recognizing text. And this usually works well, but when it doesn't work well, then we get exactly the problems that Anna here has described, that whole words can be changed and so on. And we are aware that our Mitra OCR system also does this. So in that sense, yes, we are working with BDRC together on a new OCR model that will hopefully be more precise. I think the first experiments we have done are pointing in that direction. So we really hope that we can make our own more reliable model available this summer. So right now we use Gemini, and the main idea is to have one model that is one website that is convenient to use to get more or less sufficient OCR in the first stage. But yeah, I think I can recommend to also work with the BDRC OCR tool that they have published in 2024, which is also great. And it might be in some cases more reliable than our system. So if you want to OCR large files, then our system is helpful. But yeah, for individual pages, maybe it's better to work with the BDRC tool. Yeah. Mm.
Wonderful. Thank you. Um, Other question from Yeshe, also a student at RYI.
Mm.
Is there a thought about having the AI generated static resource like dictionaries, considering the amount of data ingested is probably already much more than any human in history has
Mm.
ever has?
Mm. Yeah, I think we have already done the Sanskrit Tibetan dictionary, and obviously with that dictionary we are covering much more ground than what the Negi dictionary was able to cover. And I don't really know how many people have been involved in the Negi dictionary, but I do believe it must have been a very substantial effort, and it's a great resource. It's a great achievement. But it's obvious that for these kind of tasks, this technology is just so much more efficient and can be applied really well, because especially if we have some kind of human in the loop, if we have humans who can check the output and make adjustments, make control, then we can actually automatically create dictionary resources that can be extremely helpful. Um, and in that sense, yeah, we are currently preparing a Tibetan to Chinese dictionary that will follow the similar recipe that we used for the Sanskrit Tibetan dictionary. So we can also cover those translations. And I actually do believe that there's a huge potential for creating a new reference-based Tibetan to English dictionary, because we have all of these translations of Tibetan works now digitized, and we can probably rather easily provide the same tool that we have for Sanskrit to Tibetan, also for English. But of course, there are some strings attached to that, like again, copyright and agreement of the translators and so on. And we only would like to do this together with the community. So if there's like an agreement about how to work with this data, then we are happy to explore that. Yeah. So I think technologically, yes, we can do a lot in this regard that can be super helpful, and that is not like generative AI in the sense of providing you with some answers that are predetermined. Yeah. Mm.
Thank you. And different question again from a MA graduate, David. Um, it seems if you put the same sentence into the system twice, it can often translate that sentence differently. I'm not technically minded. Why is that?
Yes, um, this is also a good point, and we have actually discussed this before in Berkeley as well, because you will also notice that if you put the same sentence into the meter translator, into the meter translator with the grammatical function enabled, and into the meter translator with deep research enabled, you might get three rather different translations. And yeah, so on the technical end, the reason for that is just because these models operate with statistics, and the statistical process, you can actually tune a little bit on how much randomness the model will allow. So in order to create a more fluent translation, we usually want to have the model to be a bit more liberal when it generates the output, so we can actually tune the system to be more fluent and more eloquent in that sense, which then also means we might get a bit of a different translation each time, because the system will introduce some randomness in the process, which usually I think is also done by ChatGPT and Gemini and those tools. So if you go to those websites, you paste something, you will also get a slightly different answer every time. It can sometimes be very different. But yes, so in our tool, we try to contain that, but it's still absolutely happening. And that's just, again, it's a fundamental feature of the technology, that it's just really difficult to contain this completely. And when we asked our users whether they want the model to be more constrained and to always give the same translation, we actually got mixed feedback. So most of the people we asked about this, they actually like the behavior it is right now, because it can also be helpful when you are stuck on something and you just want to, okay, maybe try it again, maybe see if we change the wording a little bit, maybe it will give a different translation. And then also being able to use the different modes side by side, like deep research and the normal translation mode, and then to switch between them can actually be productive in the work. So for that reason, we decided to keep this variation, because it seems that the majority of the users is entertained by that, and it can be useful. So yeah, but it's part of the technology. Yeah.
Mhm. Sonam, would you like to voice your question?
Mhm.
Yeah, hi Sebastian.
Hi,
I'm
Sonam.
here opposite of Rangjung Yeshe in a hotel, also in Nepal.
Oh,
Hi
nice, nice.
together. Thank you so much for keeping us updated. And were you saying before that you are planning to or thinking about publishing bringing out a new Tibetan English dictionary with uh,
I mean, I think technologically speaking, it's possible, but then I think this can only be done together with the people who actually created the translations, just out of respect, because that is such a
yeah,
system. I think ideally would be most
yeah.
helpful to include the reference sentences, yeah, because most
Y-
of the time dictionaries don't have reference sentences at the moment,
Yeah.
and yeah.
So if I'm in a Drikung translation group, we
Mm,
have we translate this Drikung text, and I was asked, can you not keep an eye out on possibilities of having just a Drikung specific dictionary,
mm,
because there are
mm,
many
mm,
terms that only lamas of this lineage use,
mm,
or of this area in Tibet language wise.
mm,
And then I thought, if I would just align all the translations that we have already, then
mm,
that would be already that. We could
mm,
search for the words and whether we have already translated them. And I don't know if I would now get positive feedback from our little publishing house, and gave and aligned all these translations, also with the help of your great
mm,
aligning tools that you
mm,
have there on GitHub,
mm.
and gave them to you, so that would be what you need actually, no?
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm very happy to help your efforts here. And I know Franz also reached out to me a while ago. And yeah, then please, yeah, if you have those, I think what all that I would need is just the folder with the Tibetan text and the English translation in a way that I can recognize what is what. And then we can just run the meter alignment system on it. And
Oh, you
yeah,
would
with,
even align it. Mm.
yeah, yeah, that is no problem. I think afterwards, what you do with the data is, of course, up to you in a sense. So we can provide it for your translation project, and then you can continue to use that internally. But if your publishing house is okay with making it available publicly, then we can also consider to put it somewhere that other people can use it. Yeah. So yeah, I'm
Okay,
happy to help you. Yeah.
very nice. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll be in touch.
Wonderful. So we have 4 more questions.
Yeah.
One from Cindy, and I'm reading them out loud because of the recording also. So we need that to have a trace of that. So thank you very much for your introduction. I have a question. When I enter Tibetan sentences for translation, the English results are sometimes a bit different each time. The content in research mode is also quite different. Is this output somewhat random? If so, how can I get translation and content if there is really a best version? Sometimes my Tibetan spelling or input is not very accurate, but the translation turns out even better. What is the algorithm behind this? Do user need to understand this kind of algorithm? Would it help us use the tool better?
Yes, thank you very much for this, Cindy. And I think it really goes to the core of the problem we have with this technology. And I myself, of course, we have done deep learning for Buddhist studies now a couple of years. And it's just a fundamental problem of deep learning that the actual algorithm is not known. So in a way, we know the algorithm in a mathematical sense, like how deep learning works, that we are updating neural networks and so on. Yes, that is all understood, but how actually the model decides to translate this particle into that way, this is not legible to the developers, so we don't know, and it's also not legible to the users, obviously. So when the models create those decisions, the honest answer is that we don't really know how these decisions are made. The thing we can say is that we are using large data sets to train these models. So if we have a lot of good translation material in our data set, then we also get good translations. But in a way, the model is learning to abstract based on the data. And all of this randomness that just happens, that's part of the statistical process that sometimes, yes, you might change 1 or 2 characters in your input and maybe you make a typo, you make a mistake, but the quality actually goes up because the model for some reason gets a better idea and then comes out with that. And this is just the inherent problem of working with deep learning models because we can't really define the algorithm by the end of the day. It's just not known. And in that sense, I think the best we can do at Dharmamitra is to try to provide the users with more sources to verify the output, like to provide links into our database. And hopefully, I really hope in the future that we can also make the actual translation, the English translations, at least to some extent, available in our interface, that we can then give references. For example, this is how 84,000 has translated this sentence. I think this is absolutely something we can work out, and I really hope in the future, maybe with 84,000, maybe with SADA, with other entities who are publishing translations to, yeah, make some steps in this direction to make the system more reliable, but also to give the translators more visibility. Like I'm also not happy about the fact that this technology is trained on translations where the original authors and so on are not always represented in the technology. So I think the really nice way forward here in the future would be to make the references available with the names of the authors, of the translators, and so on. So that would be, I think, a way to tackle this. But yeah, the technology itself is a black box by the end of the day, and yeah, there's only so much we can know. Yeah.
Thank you. Other question by Tsewang. So could you please explain how Dharmamitra AI sources its Pali references? For example, do you use editions like those from the Pali Text Society or other original texts or digital canons? I am asking it because I would like to refer to the original source more easily after searching for Dharmamitra.
Yes, this is also a good point. So the party data we are using on our website is taken from the Sutta Central project, which has, to my knowledge, that's a input of the Pāli Text Society material that was originally done by the Vipassana Research Institute. And this was then segmented in a certain way based on the individual content at the Sutta Central project. And they have then digitized all of this. It's available in JSON format, and we have been working together with Sutta Center for many years on BuddhaNexus and later DharmaNexus. So this is actually the place where the data comes from. And this is a good point that we will also provide the links into Sutta Central for the references here in the future. So you can go there. And I think Sutta Central should have the Pāli Text Society page numbers in their website as well. So I think that's the place where you can establish the links. Yeah. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Alona, another question. If one lacks knowledge in the source language, is there a way to increase reliability of the translation? Maybe there are some tricks, as in the previous question, introducing the query several times.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine we can expand on this question in the afternoon session as well, because this also goes a bit into the maybe core issue we have with this technology. Because if one lacks knowledge in the source language, then of course the question arises if it's a good idea to use the translation tool at all, because we can't reliably by ourselves verify the reliability of the translation. So yeah, I would advise to be cautious with the system when we don't know the source language well. I mean, obviously, I also use it myself in cases where I don't know the language well, especially for Tibetan in domains where I'm not familiar with. If I'm looking at Dzogchen literature, for example, I've never really read Dzogchen in my life so far. And for that reason, it is, of course, very helpful to get a first understanding. But yeah, I would be very cautious, and I can't really advise on special tricks that you can use in that context. I think maybe the best would be to use Mitra together with somebody who knows the language well, and to get some idea of what works and what doesn't, so that you have a better idea on how to use it yourself. Yeah, that would be maybe my advice in that regard. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Rajiv, two questions. One, congratulations for the great talk, and thank you for opening this new world of machine learning for a person like me who knows nothing about all of these. I have studied only Buddhism and not technology. I have an ocean of questions and queries, and one or two sessions will not be enough for all of these. So could you please tell me important research articles or book reading which could make some meaning about this new AI-based technology phenomena combining with language and religion?
Yeah, I mean, this is also a good point. Maybe I don't have clear recommendations on my mind right now, but maybe I can send you an email later with a few things that are helpful to get into it. I think we don't really have any book yet. I think that would be a great thing to be written in the coming years on how religion, especially Buddhism, and this AI technology will interplay, how they interplay right now and how this will unfold in the future. I think we are in a very exciting point of time right now where we do see a lot of this happening, and maybe it's still too early to write the first books on this, but I think I hope that this will come up at some point. And I think there's lots of very, very interesting things to say and to observe. But yeah, I'm sure we have interesting books on AI technology in general that can be used as an introduction. So I'm happy to follow up with an email on this. Yeah.
A second query is not knowing XML, Java, Python, etc. can be an hindrance for working in this field, or is it?
Not necessarily. I think of course, everybody working in this on this technology has started at some point without knowing this things. So we have to learn them at some point. And it's the same for, of course, Tibetan language. Like not knowing Tibetan shouldn't be an hindrance to enter Buddhist studies. That's part of the process, yeah, to learn the language and to then yeah, make yourself familiarize with it. So I would say it has become extremely easy nowadays to get into these tools compared to just 5 years ago, because now we have all of these AI tools which make a lot of the, I would say, a bit challenging and maybe also not always very exciting parts of the work easier. Like, for example, XML has been used in digital humanities for quite some years to create critical editions, to do this so-called TI markup. And this was always challenging to learn in the beginning, but now with the AI tools, you can quickly ask questions and get some idea of how the system is working. And I think especially for these STEM-oriented tasks like programming, markup languages, databases, and so on, AI has become extremely useful. So I would just recommend to start with that and to familiarize yourself with XML. Maybe read a book. That is always a good idea as well. And yeah, then don't be afraid. I think that shouldn't be the hindrance to do work on this. I think we have good tools nowadays to learn and to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I would support that that comment. There is two more questions. I will read Atsuki's first, and then Adam can come in. So, what kind of collaborative relationship does Dharmamitra have with projects such as 84,000, translating the words of the Buddha, and also with Indo-Tibetan Lexical Resources, ITLR initiative at the Kensei Center of the University of Hamburg. Further, what are the potential opportunities, challenges for such collaborations?
Yeah, also great question. And I think Andreas Doctor is here on the call. So I think our relationship with 84,000 is positive, and I also hope that it will increase in the future. Yeah, of course, we know that certainly translators at 84,000 are using Dharmamitra in some way. I'm sure that the multilingual information retrieval capabilities to find matching Sanskrit and Chinese passages for Tibetan must be very useful for people who are working on canonical material, like Kangyo text, for example. And in that sense, I'm probably I'm quite sure that 84,000 is happy to that there are people who are using this. And of course, we are also using 84,000 translations in our system, which I can understand this might be for some translators a bit of a frustration perhaps to see AI tools using this, but at the same time, I think we have discussed this in the past, and it's something I would really like at some point to provide links from Dharmamitra into 84,000 translations, and in that way to increase the transparency. And I hope this can be something to work on in the future. So this would be one direction I'm happy to explore. And in that sense, yeah, we are super grateful for the work that 84,000 has done and for the translations it has created and for the service it's doing for the community. It's magnificent. And yeah, we hope that we continue that positive relationship. And yeah, when it comes to other resources like ITLR, and of course we have other translation projects. Obviously, Sada Foundation is supporting Dharmamitra very strongly, and we have the very positive relationship with Sada here, and I think that will also continue in the future. And yeah, I think with other project, it really is something we can work out individually. Of course, it's in a way it's difficult to keep an active relationship with each project because it just at some point becomes too much. And Dharmamitra is super small, so it's basically myself. Then we have our front-end developer, we have Amina, we have Hubert, then we have Sada, who's super helpful with some organizational parts, and that's basically it. So it's not like we have a large team that can handle all of the collaborations that we might want to do. Yeah, and I would be super happy to work more closely together with other teams. But then the day is quite short, and how many things we can do in one day is really, really limited. And yeah, I hope we can do more in the future. It would be really important, I think, because this is like the kind of relationship we can have here that maybe OpenAI and Google are not willing to do with our community, and nobody there is interested to spend time with us on a Zoom call to discuss on how to improve, I don't know, Dzogchen translation quality. But here we actually have a realistic chance to do this, and yeah, hopefully in the future that's possible. Yeah.
Can I just quickly just say thank you, Sebastian. I totally agree with everything you say, and I just want to say also from 84,000, we have a really good relationship, I think, with Dharmamitra and with you. You've been helpful to us over the years, and also we, as you say, we also see a lot of potential in the tools that you're presenting today. It's exciting to see all the new developments that you're working on, and yeah, so we are definitely very happy for the work that you are doing. So I just want to say that, and thank you also for spending your Saturday with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So, Adam, would you like to voice your question?
Oh, hi. Yes, thank you very much indeed for this wonderful overview presentation, and seeing how it's going step by step from years ago with BuddhaNexus, and it's really going into extraordinary areas, and a sort of real human cultural milestone in terms of opportunity in seeing all this incredible diversity of sources and languages. So thank you. And just one little thing you mentioned at the beginning in the presentation was at this precise moment. Just one little point, you were saying people are using, we have Dharmamitra, and people might use Claude for one thing, Dharmamitra for one thing, Gemini for one thing. So I just wondered whether you had any little comments in terms of the specifics, in terms of, in terms of an example of that, what someone might use Claude for or Gemini independently.
Yeah, that's a good point, and maybe the afternoon session can give us also a bit more room to expand on that. But yeah, I think so. What we have observed from our users, and I think also Kurt, who's the great let's say basically the initiator of the project together with me. I think we without him nothing of Dharmamitra would have happened the way it has. And I think Kurt was always very realistic from the outset that we are not in the position, or we should not strive to replace everything that systems like Claude and Gemini and others are doing. And for example, one use case that he's always advocating for, which I also find a good example of what you can do with these tools that Dharmamitra currently is not able to do, is, for example, you can have projects at Claude, like you have the ability to create a project where you can then upload specific PDFs and Word documents of existing translations. And if you already have for the text you are translating, or for the material you're working for a PhD project or something like that, if you already have a very clear idea of what kind of sources you are working with, you might have already a reference translation, maybe something you did yourself, then you can upload that to the Claude project. And I think Gemini has the same feature. There also is the tool called Notebook LM, which I think is kind of a project-based system as well. Then the system will scan your existing material when making translations, for example, or you can also ask questions, and then the Claude project system will answer the questions based on the references you upload. And I mean, it's, I think, quite obvious how this can be extremely useful. If you're working on a specific text, you can upload the existing translations and other Tibetan texts and so on. So this is, I think, one of the really strong points where these commercial LLMs currently are very powerful, and I think in a way also, addressing something different than Dharmamitra. So I think that's also a bit of the philosophy behind the project. So if you go to Claude, you can ask open-ended questions. Like I can put in the name of some obscure translator from Tibet from the 12th century and ask, do you know the name of the mother of this? And maybe it comes up with something. Like there are no guardrails in these systems. You can ask anything. And most of the time they try to answer and it might come up with something, but there's a high chance that the answer might not be actually reliable. And in that sense, Mitra is always from the whole philosophy, we have been more constrained. So it's really designed as a translation tool. So it looks like Google Translate in a way, or like DeepL. So you have a window on the left-hand side, you get a translation on the right-hand side. So we are not even having an interface where you can ask open-ended questions easily. So we might introduce a bit of that with the Mitra Explore system, but still we try to communicate to the users that our system is not good at everything, but we are good at certain things. So it's like a more selective tool set. But obviously, also, if you want to do things like translating into a specific register, like very formal language, or you want to have it more fluent and less precise, for example, if you want to have a more academic and more like a word-by-word translation, all of those things you can actually prompt Claude and Gemini to do that, while Mitra is currently a much more confined user interface. So we are just optimizing for quality over flexibility. So instead of having all of these options in the interface to make all of that work, we are trying to just provide one solution that is hopefully more reliable than the other. So it's a bit more on the end of a dictionary than a free form AI tool, even though it has some of those aspects as well. Yeah. So I think that's where I would draw the border between these tools and Mitra. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm really actually happy that this Saturday is actually kind of allowing us to all come together, having Andreas here. Marcus also reached out to me because he couldn't be there from Sadr Foundation. So there is a real sense of collaboration happening, and RYI is really happy to be part of this journey of offering more and more of this possibility of sharing the Dharma, understanding the Dharma, and making it accessible. So this is a delightful side of this Saturday for me. On a more difficult, perhaps, background question, I've been using these tools now, and I'm in the back of my mind is the whole ecology of it that is coming up in my mind. So I wonder if Dharmamitra or discussions around the water usage, the energy, the raw material, that kind of thing is on your mind as Dharmamitra, or if the questions have been discussed about that.
Yes. No, for sure. I mean, I have been looking at the energy use and the footprint that our project is causing. And in 2024, in summer, I think we trained the Mitra base model, which is like the biggest model we have trained so far, which is currently used for the search system. And it was also used as the main translation system for quite some time. And the training of that model has caused about the carbon dioxide footprint of one transcontinental flight. So that's about, I think, 1000 kg or something. I would have to look it up, but it's about the equivalent of flying from, I don't know, San Francisco to Germany, for example. So it's that is about 1 month of training. Then, of course, the deployment and making the tool available on a daily basis also incurs a lot of cost on carbon dioxide. I would guess it's probably in the ballpark of 1 or 2 transcontinental flights a year that we are spending on carbon dioxide to make the service available. Then I don't know exactly how much carbon dioxide our Gemini usage is causing, because Google is not super transparent with that. We are using the smallest Gemini model, so we have the Flash model, so that should be less intense. It should be on the light side, but it will also contribute. So, but those numbers, it's a bit difficult to say. I think all in all, I would assume we are probably on the lighter end when it comes to AI applications, because Mitra uses a lot of basic database technology, and really we have a lot of small expert models that do specific things, like for the search, for the grammar, and so on. These are not large language models like OpenAI is using, but these are small specific models. And it's also just the result of us being an academic project. So we have to work with academic funding. That also means we cannot spend $5 million to train a model. In the best circumstances, we might have a few $1,000s to do this. And that also limits on how much harm we can do to the environment. And also, I think there's something, because I don't really believe that training LLMs is something we should do as a Buddhist studies or Buddhism community. I think these models are too big, they are too expensive, and I think also the prospects of doing that, I'm a bit unconvinced that it really helps us. So far, I think training small expert models to do grammatical analysis, to do dictionary lookups, and so on, and then combining these in a clever way seems to work better, and then to use existing commercial LLMs in a measured way to integrate into that system. But of course, I would also hope that maybe in the future we see more eco-friendly and maybe also not privately hosted models. So that's another thing that I would really like to explore in the future, is to have an open source model hosted maybe at hardware at Tohoku University, for example, that runs completely independent from commercial APIs, because then we can completely control our footprint and we absolutely know what we are spending. So I really hope in the future to go in that direction, because it would be really good for the community in various ways, I think. Also, just having more control over the system and also being more able to have faithful quality that is consistent. So yeah, I think for the future that would be great to be able to do that. Yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful to hear that you've been putting thoughts into this and kind of even measuring. I'm always a little bit obscure about how we measure. I remember reading how this is measured. It's quite interesting to try to measure it.
Yes,
So
yes.
thank you. So I don't know if this was supposed to be a pause. I think you had something else for the morning, or is it?
I mean, we can, because that would then open, I think, a whole new discussion. I have also a number of slides where I have my thoughts about how this might influence translation, training, and scholarship. But I think this could be a good thing for the afternoon session, maybe to start with those slides as a discussion starter, and then we can go into that and look at those more. And yeah, I think there must be many opinions, and I'm very happy to hear different opinions on what, people on this call and this workshop think, how this technology might influence scholarship. And I'm also very happy to discuss critical parts on how it really might make things worse, because this is one of the good opportunities to bring it out and to, see what people think. I'm very curious. Yeah.
Wonderful. So maybe we will stop here then, and then reconvene at 2 p.m. Nepal time. So note if you're somewhere else that there is 15 minutes difference in Nepal. We're on another time frame. So at 2 p.m. we'll reconvene and bring up some more questions and stories for Sebastian. But I really, really appreciate your morning session. I think it's really opening up a lot of different possibilities for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And this is also wonderful. I'm super happy to discuss this with all of you. Yeah, this is great.